Hey, in this video I'm going to show you how to make this delicious casserole from the early 1940s. It's called Creole Spaghetti. And what it really is just big spaghetti with sausage, crushed tomatoes, spices. It's so easy to make. I know it looks very humble, but it's so good. And those are buttered breadcrumbs on top, which makes it really, really, really delicious. So stick around while I show you how to do it. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make Creole Style Spaghetti. But don't be confused. This dish is a casserole, not spaghetti like we usually think of today, with noodles topped with spaghetti sauce. This 1940s recipe is essentially a tomato, sausage, and pasta casserole with a crunchy breadcrumb topping. It was simple, economical, and practical for its time. The name Creole was mostly for appeal, suggesting a little southern flavor without using authentic Creole ingredients. Casseroles like this were part of a relatively new trend in the 1940s, bringing easy one-dish meals to the American dinner table. The very first thing to do is to cook 1 pound of lean ground pork along with 2 onions that have been chopped up, 2 small onions, or you could use 1 large onion, whatever you prefer. The original recipe calls for using 1 can of spaghetti, like Chef Boyardee's spaghetti. However, that sounds really yucky, and I don't want to do that. That was obviously intended to be a shortcut. So I suggest cooking enough spaghetti to equal about 1 cup of cooked spaghetti. I didn't have any spaghetti on hand. I just had angel hair pasta, so that's what I used instead. Okay, now that my meat is fully cooked, it's time for me to add my crushed tomatoes. So let me explain. The original recipe calls for using 1 can of spaghetti and tomato sauce, but I didn't want to use that, so I decided to make substitutions. It also calls for using 2/3 cup of sieved tomatoes, that's really crushed tomatoes. So I added the 2/3 cup of crushed tomatoes, and I decided to add another cup of crushed tomatoes to compensate for the sauce that would have been in the canned spaghetti. And I just like my filling to be a little bit saucy. I'm adding a little bit of sugar to the tomato mixture on the stove. This is a way to balance out the acidity of the tomatoes because they can be quite bitter. This is to make it more palatable. So I would suggest using about a tablespoon. Of course, you can adjust it however you wish. And now it's time to add some seasonings. Believe it or not, the original recipe only calls for using salt. And that's probably because this recipe came out during World War II, and a lot of people didn't have access to many spices back then because of food rationing. And even before then, your average American probably wouldn't have used a lot of spices. So I decided to add my own spices, and I'm going to make some suggestions. I added 2 cloves of garlic, minced garlic, 1/4 teaspoon black pepper, 1/4 teaspoon thyme, about a 1/2 teaspoon to 1 teaspoon of salt. You can adjust your salt however you want. Some people like more, some people like less. And a 1/2 teaspoon of paprika, and you can add 1/8 teaspoon of cayenne pepper if you like. Now it's time to make the breadcrumb topping, and this is going to go on top of the casserole before you put it in the oven to bake it. And this is an important step. It's very tasty. So what you're going to do is toast 1 cup of breadcrumbs and 2 tablespoons of melted butter. You want to stir those around in the butter so that they get coated and turn a nice golden brown color. But of course, you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to burn them. So just for a few minutes until they're a nice golden brown color. You can make a little more if you want to. I'm adding 1 cup of shredded cheddar cheese. The original recipe calls for using 1 cup of shredded American cheese, and that's probably because it was very popular at the time and many Americans were familiar with it. But I prefer cheddar cheese. Of course, if you want to use American cheese, go right ahead, but I'm using cheddar cheese because I just think it's a better option. And you want to stir that around until it's fully melted. The next step is to add your pasta, and because the original recipe called for using 1 can of spaghetti, I can't tell you how much spaghetti actually comes in a can of spaghetti, like Chef Boyardee spaghetti. So I just made a guess. I guessed about 1 cup of spaghetti. Of course, if you feel that it needs more, then you could add more, whatever you want. I just don't want my casserole to be too dry, so I think 1 cup is good. And I am using angel hair pasta instead of regular spaghetti because that's all I had on hand. We are getting closer. So now I'm adding the casserole to a casserole dish that I've sprayed with cooking spray. I do recommend doing that. And you want to use about a 9 by 13 inch pan. Make sure everything is spread out evenly in the pan. And then top the casserole with those delicious breadcrumbs that you toasted in the frying pan a little earlier. And now you're going to bake this in a preheated oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes or until it's done. Please keep in mind that you may need to adjust either your baking time or oven temperature depending on your oven. And there you go, 1940s Creole style spaghetti. This humble casserole is a direct link to 1940s home cooking. It shows how families stretched ingredients and enjoyed simple comfort food. And while it may look modest, it's a perfect canvas. You can add your own spices or tweaks while still appreciating its original charm. A little taste is like taking a bite of history. And by the way, I love exploring these old recipes because they are a little bit of history, and I love to see the way that cooking has evolved over the years. Okay, that's it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you've made it through the entire thing, I do appreciate you sticking around and watching it to the end. And while you're here, please do consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already done so. And please just check out my link in the bio and visit my Amazon page where I make a lot of great recommendations for things for the home, things for the kitchen, beauty, fashion, fragrance, you name it. Thanks for watching.